When they see the purity and reverence of your lives, your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as braided hair and wearing of gold jewelry and fine clothes. Instead, it should be that of an inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. For this is the way the holy women of the past, who put their hope in God, used to make themselves beautiful. They were submissive to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her master. You are her daughters, if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. In this passage, in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 to 6, we find four principles that you wives can follow in order to help change your husbands. The first one is the principle of submission. The principle of submission. Now, if you have your bulletin with you at the back, there's a sermon outline there that you can use. And you can fill out those blanks, help you remember the things that I'm going to talk about today. The first principle is the principle of submission. The Bible says, wives, be submissive to your husbands. Now, to submit means to be subject to your husband, showing him honor and respect. As much as possible, wives, submit to your husbands. Some of you might protest, my husband doesn't care. My husband should love me as Christ loved the church, but she is not a Christian, so how will I submit to him? You should submit to him. Because the Bible says, whether or not he is a Christian, you are to submit to your husband. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, Bible says, submit to your husband as unto the Lord. That means, perhaps you don't want to do it to your husband. Just do it for the Lord. Because that's what God wants. As unto the Lord. That doesn't mean that you need to worship your husband like you worship the Lord. No, of course not. Although some wives, they have brought some burnt offerings to their husbands. Talking about, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And that is not acceptable in the sight or in the stomach of your husband. Submission means you are seeking to yield yourself to your husband, submitting to him as much as possible. The question is, are there limits to submission? Do you have to submit to your husband no matter what he asks you to do? Pastor, kahit na ano bang sabihin niya sa akin, kinakailangan ko bang sundin? There are limits to submission. There are limits to submission. If you look at Colossians chapter 3, verse 18, the Bible says, submit to your husband as is fitting in the Lord. As is fitting implies that there are indeed limits to submission. And just like we are all subject, we are all to submit to the government, for example. That is one of the orders to us. In Romans chapter 13, verses 1 to 3, we must submit to our government. And our government has laws. We have laws of the land. We have speed limits. We have taxation, tax laws. If you don't follow them, then you have to suffer the consequence. We must follow them, submit to them. Pastor, I don't want to pay my taxes. The government is always charging so much, collecting so much taxes. Well, Vote for you. Vote for you if you were given that right to vote. But until then, you have to pay your taxes. Or else you'll have a prison ministry. Obey the laws of the land. Remember when there was a time when it was forbidden to pray to any other god other than the emperor. It was during the time of Daniel. But Daniel did not obey the law of the land. That is the time we are not to obey. That is the time we are not to submit if the law of the land contradicts the laws of God. We are a higher authority. We respect a higher authority than the authority of the government, than the authority, wives, than the authority of your husband. And that's also true. If your husband tells you to do something contrary to the commandment of God, said, honey, let's go out and let's get drunk. You can say, no, it's against the will of God. The Bible says, and be not get drunk with wine. Honey, let's go and rub a back. You don't need to submit to that, because that's contrary to the laws of God. Thou shalt not steal. When the disciples were forbidden to preach the gospel, remember in the New Testament? They said, you are not supposed to talk about Christ anymore to anyone. And the disciples said, we must obey God rather than man. That's in Acts chapter 5, verse 29. And so that's the principle of submission. And wives, you need to submit to your husbands. Next is the principle of conduct. Principle of conduct. Win him not by your words, but by your actions. We have a saying, actions speak louder than words. They are more effective than what you say. Your conduct shows more about you than what you say. Right? And so, well, it's a fact that women are more verbal than men. Yes or no? Do you agree with that? No? They're more verbal. Yeah? Well, according to survey, that men, in one day, men only uses 25,000 words in one day. But women, they use 50,000 words in one day. You will just notice how women are more verbal than men by the way they answer the phone. If a man answers the phone, he reaches for a pencil. If a woman answers the phone, he reaches for a chair. Just remember this, Christian wives. Your husband will be primarily won by the way you live, not by the words you say. There's a place for preaching, and there's also a place for living it. Living it, doing it, showing it by your conduct. I know some women, Christian wives, are so desperate, trying to win their husbands to the Lord. They're trying to bring them to church. They're trying to do whatever they can so that their husband will change. I know a woman who tries to even try to help God evangelize her own husband. What she does is she puts gospel tracts in his